The cool night air was thick with the scent of caramel and popcorn, a sickly sweet aroma that seemed out of place in the eerie silence of the deserted carnival. Neon lights flickered sporadically, casting long, twisted shadows across the empty fairgrounds. The once cheerful sounds of laughter and music were replaced by an oppressive stillness, broken only by the distant creak of rusted metal and the occasional whisper of wind through the tattered banners. 4 strangers stood at the entrance, each drawn to the carnival by a curiosity they couldn't quite explain. They hadn't planned to visit, but found themselves irresistibly pulled toward the bright lights in the middle of nowhere. There was Jake, a brooding man in his early 30s, Samantha, a sharp-witted woman with a hint of a southern drawl, Maria, a quiet yet observant artist, and Keith, an amiable but timid high school teacher. "Looks like we're stuck here," Jake muttered, glancing back at the massive wrought iron gates that had mysteriously closed behind them. "We should find a way out," Samantha suggested, her eyes scanning the carnival for any signs of life. "This place gives me the creeps." Keith nodded in agreement, but Maria seemed lost in thought, her eyes fixed on a distant point. "Maybe we should explore. There has to be someone around who can help." Reluctantly, the group moved deeper into the carnival, their footsteps echoing on the cracked pavement. The attractions, once vibrant with color, now stood as ominous monoliths in the moonlight. The Ferris wheel loomed overhead, its carriages swaying gently in the breeze, while the funhouse mirrors reflected distorted versions of themselves back at them. Their first stop was the Hall of Mirrors, a labyrinthine structure that beckoned them inside with a dimly lit side. "Welcome to the maze of reflections," it read in chipped paint. As they entered, the air grew colder, and the reflections around them seemed to shift and warp with every step. "Stick together," Jake warned, his voice echoing off the glass walls. But the mirrors seemed to have a mind of their own, twisting and turning the passages until the group was hopelessly lost. "Over here," Maria called out, her voice tinged with urgency. They followed her voice to find her standing in front of a particularly large mirror. The reflection showed the 4 of them standing together, but something was wrong. Their reflections wore twisted smiles, eyes glinting with malevolent glee. "That's not us," Keith stammered, backing away from the mirror. The reflected versions of themselves began to move independently, stepping out of the mirror and into the real world. Panic set in as the doppelgangers advanced. Jake lunged at his mirror self, only to find his hands passing through as if it were made of smoke. The mirrored Jake grinned, eyes flashing with a sinister light, and swung a fist that connected with Jake's jaw, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Run!" Samantha screamed, and they bolted through the maze, the laughter of their doppelgangers echoing behind them. They burst out of the Hall of Mirrors, breathless and shaken. "That was insane," Maria panted, looking back at the entrance. "What was that?" "Something very wrong," Jake replied, rubbing his jaw where his doppelganger had struck him. "We need to find a way out before something worse happens." Their next encounter was at the freak show tent, a dilapidated structure that seemed to exude a palpable sense of dread. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. A series of cages lined the walls, each one holding a grotesque figure that seemed to writhe in the shadows. "Look at this," Samantha whispered, pointing to a plaque that read, "See the wonders of the world, marvel at the bearded lady, gasp at the 2-headed boy." "These aren't wonders," Keith said, his voice trembling. "They're prisoners." As they moved deeper into the tent, a low growl echoed from one of the cages. A pair of glowing eyes stared out at them, filled with a hunger that sent shivers down their spines. "We need to leave," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. But before they could turn to go, the eyes lunged at the bars, a monstrous figure slamming against the cage with a force that rattled the entire tent. The door creaked open, and the creature, a twisted amalgamation of human and beast, stumbled out. "Run!" Jake shouted, and they sprinted out of the tent, the creature's roars echoing behind them. They didn't stop until they reached the Ferris wheel, its carriages swaying ominously. "We can't keep running," Samantha said, out of breath. "We need to find whoever's in charge." "Or whatever's in charge," Jake corrected. The sound of slow, deliberate clapping drew their attention. Standing at the base of the Ferris wheel was a tall, thin man dressed in a faded ringmaster's coat. His eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating light, and a cruel smile played on his lips. "Welcome, my dear guests," he said, his voice smooth and mocking. I hope you're enjoying the show. Who are you? Keith demanded. I am the Ringmaster, the man replied with a theatrical bow. And this is my carnival. You're all part of the main event. What do you want from us? Maria asked, her voice shaking. The same thing I want from all my guests, the Ringmaster said, his smile widening. Entertainment. With a flick of his wrist, the Ferris wheel sprang to life, the carriages spinning faster and faster and faster until they blurred into a whirlwind of color and light. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and the carnival itself seemed to warp and shift, the attractions melding together into a nightmarish landscape. Welcome to the final act, the Ringmaster declared, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. Let's see how long you can survive. The ground split open, and the four strangers found themselves falling into darkness. They landed in a twisted version of the carnival where the attractions were alive and hungry for blood. The carousel horses snarled and snapped at them, their eyes burning with an unnatural fire. The bumper cars crashed together with deadly force, and the haunted house groaned and creaked, its walls closing in like a living creature. We have to stick together, Jake said, his voice firm. We can get through this. But the carnival had other plans. The ground beneath them split again, separating them into different parts of the twisted fairground. Each of them faced their own nightmare, the attractions turning into deadly traps designed to test their will to survive. Maria found herself in the House of Horrors, the walls closing in as the air grew thick with the stench of decay. Shadows flitted around her, whispering her deepest fears. She stumbled through the dark corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. Just as she thought she was free, the Ringmaster appeared, his eyes gleaming with malice. With a wave of his hand, the shadows closed in, and Maria's screams echoed through the carnival. Keith found himself in the funhouse, the mirrors reflecting not his own image, but those of the people he had failed to save as a teacher. Their accusing eyes bore into him, driving him to the brink of madness. As he tried to escape, the Ringmaster appeared, his laughter echoing through the halls. The mirrors shattered, and Keith was swallowed by the darkness. Samantha faced the Ferris wheel, its carriages spinning wildly. She climbed into one, hoping to find a way out, but the ride took on a life of its own. The carriages swung violently, throwing her around like a rag doll. Just as she thought she would be flung into the void, the Ringmaster appeared, his grin widening. With a snap of his fingers, the wheel stopped, and Samantha was left hanging, suspended between life and death. Jake found himself in the Ringmaster's tent, the air heavy with the scent of sulfur. The Ringmaster stood at the center, his eyes burning with a sinister light. "Why are you doing this?" Jake demanded. "Because I can," the Ringmaster replied with a shrug. "Because I must. The carnival demands it." Jake lunged at him, but the Ringmaster disappeared in a puff of smoke, reappearing behind him. "You can't fight me," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "but you can try." With a wave of his hand, the tent transformed into a maze of fire and shadows. Jake stumbled through the labyrinth, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The flames licked at his heels, the shadows whispering his darkest fears. As he reached the center of the maze, the Ringmaster reappeared, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Welcome to the final act," he said, his voice echoing through the tent. "Let's see how it ends." Jake braced himself for the final showdown, but the Ringmaster simply laughed. With a snap of his fingers, the maze collapsed, and Jake found himself falling into darkness. He woke up outside the carnival, the morning sun casting long shadows across the fairgrounds. The gates were open, and the carnival was gone, as if it had never been there. Jake stumbled to his feet, his mind reeling from the night's events. As he looked around, he saw the others, each of them bearing the marks of their ordeal. They were alive, but forever changed by the horrors they had faced. The carnival was gone, but its legacy remained.